Finally, something that makes sense. Finally, a report comes out linking a sharpshooter to the San Antonio Spurs. And this one is something that the Spurs should actually go for. And we're going to break it all down here on Spurs Digest with your host, Keenan Warner. And right now, we're on the road to 2K before the season starts. We're on the road to 2,000 subs before the season starts, so hit that subscribe button, take a spur of the moment to get every Spurs moment, get daily Spurs content right here. An article has surfaced with an actual sharpshooter and a person who makes sense for the San Antonio Spurs being linked to the San Antonio Spurs. This is not a blockbuster. We got to give up the farm for Tre Young. We've got to move heaven and earth for Jimmy Butler. This is a trade that makes sense for all parties involved, and this is a trade that actually should and needs to happen. The San Antonio Spurs are rebuilt in the midst of a rebuild, but at the same time can go out and win at least 500% or 50% of their games to get to 500 on the season. They have the young core, obviously Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, Jeremy Sochan, and Wemby. Excellent position to take the league by storm in the coming years. Of course, we agree with that 100%. As the Spurs hope to space the floor around Wemby and shooters, a wing defender will continue to be priority, and they have been linked to Tre Young. Get that out of the way. But his teammate DeAndre Hunter could be a viable target for the San Antonio Spurs. DeAndre Hunter makes so much sense. He makes so much sense for what the Spurs need and want. He was expected to be a high-level wing defender. He has been better than average, but injuries have affected his explosiveness, and playing next to a young and Clint Capella has resulted in playing too big of a role on defense. Absolutely. We'll get into his defensive role here in just a moment. The Spurs could offer Harrison Barnes a future pick for Hunter. Inside the Spurs suggests that the Spurs try and trade Barnes in the least favorable of the Spurs and Hawks draft picks in 2027 for Hunter. That makes sense. That makes a world of sense. That's something they need to do. Atlanta looks to build around Zachary, I wish I could pronounce his last name, but the young French star, he is going to be something in the league that should be good, a developmental project. But you've got him, you've got Clint Capella, you got Jalen Johnson, you've got obviously Tre Young there. They got rid of DeJounte Murray. They're trying to move into a new direction. Tre Young may not even be there in a couple years. This is all dependent on what the Hawks feel like they need to do going forward. But DeAndre Hunter is kind of the odd man out in that scenario, and he doesn't need to be there. He is not a guy who is going to initially benefit, and they don't want to stunt the young growth of their rookie that they took this year in the draft. But could the Spurs overpay for Hunter? Sure, but you don't want to get into too much of a contract bind with him. But here's the thing, doesn't really matter because the Spurs got all the money in the world. And then on the other side, Barnes has 2 seasons left on his contract and the tanking Hawks could flip him next summer before the 2026 trade deadline to a contender for an additional draft pick. Absolutely. There are teams like, say, Milwaukee, and Chris Middleton gets dinged up and they need themselves a veteran. You could place Harrison Barnes there, champion. He's been there before, done that, shooter to help space the floor for pick and rolls, maybe between Giannis and Dame. You just place the 4-4, Giannis to get to work, for Dame to get downhill, all of those things. There are plenty of teams who would take someone like Harrison Barnes, especially because he'd be on an expiring deal coming next year, even this year, depending. But here's the thing. We get to DeAndre Hunter, and 15.6 points a game, about 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, about 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks. The thing that we need to key in on, he's a 40% shooter on corner threes this season. Or last season he was. Most of them were his threes were assisted. Most of his shots were threes. He had almost 50% of his shots were threes, and he shot overall 38.5% from 3. That's not just good shooting. That is borderline elite shooting in the NBA. And what better to pair with the alien, to pair with Chris Paul, who's going to be working on working, obviously, in the pick and roll. He's going to be orchestrating the offense. You've got Tre Jones off the bench who likes to do similar things. You got Stephon Castle who can get downhill. What better to pair with them than a lethal shooter? And not even just a lethal shooter that fits your timeline. Because Harrison Barnes is a sharpshooter. He can shoot. He helps space the floor. He's smart. He is a crafty wing veteran. But he doesn't fit your timeline. He's not going to be there for your long-term plan. DeAndre Hunter legitimately could be there for the long-term plan. I've been talking about, through the side, getting Jalen Johnson in the offseason. I understand that DeAndre Hunter is not Jalen Johnson, and Jalen Johnson most likely will be retained from Atlanta unless he does not want to be there. But DeAndre Hunter makes sense for the San Antonio Spurs roster. His defensive rating, we told you we're going to get back into that, and we're going to now. His defensive rating, 121 last year in the NBA. Not a great defensive rating because the league average was 116. So he was a little bit below league average defensively last season, but a lot of his defensive ability, it was that he had to guard one of the two best players on the floor because you didn't have great players. You have Clint Capella, who you only want him on a big. You got Trae Young there. DeJounte Murray, as we all know, can play defense, but he also had to go to more of a scoring role, so defense wasn't going to be only his primary. And then you've got players like Jalen Johnson and him. He's going to have to take one of the best wing defenders always. So you got Stephon Castle playing 25 minutes a game roughly to start off the season. We'll see what the minutes look like. Great defender, can take any guard. We've got Devin Vassell, underrated defender, can take any guard. You've got Jeremy Sochan, can guard 1 through 4, and will be taking the best forward. You've got Victor Wembanyama in the paint. Anything wrong goes outside, you've got the great eraser on the inside. Great defender, can switch. And then now you get DeAndre Hunter, a guy, bigger body, longer, can slide, and you don't have to put him in a position to where he needs to be checking Luka one-on-one and not getting much help on the backside other than maybe a Clint Capella range over. But if that happens, that's just a backdoor lob to Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively or Derek Jones Jr. in the Luka case. You've now got people who can actually help you out, so that 121 defensive rating will go down. And I know it will go down because you see things like this. Blowing that up a little bit more. Rudy Gobert. This is the defensive ratings from everybody in 23-24. Top 15, I should say, from everybody. You got Rudy Gobert on that list. You've got Karl Anthony Towns on that list. At 16 and 17 that are not there, you've got Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley on that list. That's 4 Minnesota Timberwolves. Rudy Gobert made them better defenders. Mike Conley at this age isn't a great defender. He's crafty. He's good. Don't get me wrong. He's definitely a solid plus defender. You want him on your roster. But he's not a top 15, 16, 17 defender in the league. That's not him. He is not all defensive second team worthy. Jaden McDaniels, on the other hand, can be and is. But Mike Conley at this point, no. And the reason why Mike Conley was there is because he plays great team defense. He was a great defender when he played with the Grizzlies, but now obviously in the later stages of his career, in the last leg of his career, he's not going to have that same explosiveness. Nikola Jokic is number 3 on this list. Obviously, defensive rating goes a little bit up and down, whatnot. That's perfectly fine. But my point is that the defensive rating doesn't always give you the full picture of how good or how bad of a defender that you are, because no one was going to say that Jokic is a better defender than Bam Adebayo. But the defensive rating would say that he is a better defender than Bam Adebayo. That's just not how it works. He's not a better defender. We know this. Bam can switch 1 through 5. He was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year last year for a reason. But when you have greatness around you defensively, that's going to improve you. You stay healthy, and you're not giving up much. You're giving up Harrison Barnes and a future pick, one of the many picks that you already have, for a guy who can shoot close to 40% from the floor. From 3, that is. From the floor, 46% he was last year, but 40% from 3. to go along with all these other players, and he fits your timeline, this is a trade that makes sense. These pieces, you don't need to mortgage the future. You can still get someone like Cooper Flagg if you happen to fall there into pick in the draft. This draft has a lot of people that are going to be in it for the long haul and people that you're going to want for the future. So you don't even have to give up your picks. You get a guy who can help you win now and help you win in the future. This is something they should pursue. This is something that will propel the Spurs forward this season and moving forward. So these are the trades that they should look at. They don't need to mortgage the future. They don't need to try to give up Keldon Johnson and 6 picks or whatnot to go get a guy who is going to be there for a 3-year max contract deal when you can go get pieces like this, build organically like the Spurs have done forever, and then go win championships that way. But let me know in the comments if you think DeAndre Hunter fits the San Antonio Spurs as well as I do, or if you think that there's other pieces that they can get, or let me know just your overall thoughts on this trade in general. But this has been Spurs Digest with your host, Keenan Warner. I appreciate all of you guys, and I will see you guys very soon.